you've got to do the job before you get the job. Build your ideal target list, prospect into them, email them, call them. Once you land an interview, put that into your pipeline, follow up, make sure that you're running like a tight sales cycle. Always ask for next steps, close them, tell them you want the position, do the intangibles, things that other people will not do. Send a video, send them a gift in the mail, something to stand out from anyone else that is just hitting apply and doing nothing else.
Landing a great job opportunity is sometimes very challenging. Breaking into tech and getting hired as a sales rep can be even harder. When I was applying to my first sales jobs, I also struggled with the unknown, what to expect, what the tech industry was like, and how do I break in? After years of being an SDR myself, I've decided to build something I wish I had in the beginning. My name is Stefan, and in the SDR Hire podcast, I interview successful SDRs and salespeople who share their stories straight from the trenches. Learn how they got their first job offers, how they succeed every day in their roles, and what makes them stand out in their organizations. We all have what it takes. We just need someone to remind us of the opportunity and give us a better chance for success. Let's get your next SDR gig. Hey, welcome back to the SDR Hire podcast. I'm your host, Stefan, and if you're new to the channel, this is a place where you can learn from top producing salespeople what it's like working in tech sales, how do you break in, what do companies look for, and how to succeed as an SDR all for free. And today, I'm chatting with Roberto Carrero. Roberto just started running his own consulting practice where he helps companies and individuals with their sales strategies and setting up outbound sales sequences using a software called Outreach. Now, what's interesting is how he got here. So Roberto spent quite some time actually selling Outreach, first as an SDR, then an account executive. And just as an FYI, Outreach is one of the biggest players in the sales engagement space, which basically means it's letting you send automated sequences of emails, cold calls, LinkedIn touches, etc., so you can reach more prospects and sell more as an SDR or an AE. And after 4.5 years, a trip to the President's Club, and having helped over 100 companies purchase Outreach, he realized how big the sales strategy space is and how much help sales reps need when doing outbound using Outreach. So I thought his experience and point of view would be awesome for all of us. So Roberto, great to have you on, man.
Thanks for having me, and appreciate the intro.
Awesome. I'm always reluctant and kind of, am I doing the intro correctly? Because I did it just from the LinkedIn profile. So I hope this was cool.
You rocked it.
Okay, awesome. Okay. So your background is pretty cool. It's very rich with basically sales. I haven't seen anything else. So how did that all start? How did you come across sales? How did you break into tech sales? And then we can transition into Outreach.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll even take you a little bit farther back than what you see on my LinkedIn page there. So I used to work at a grocery store. That was like my first job. And I remember needing to find a way to pay for college. And I quickly realized that working at a grocery store wasn't going to cut it, right? So I was chatting with one of my friends one day that worked with me at the grocery store, and he told me he got this sales job. And apparently all you had to do was call AT&T customers like on their home phone. And he said that you made this thing called commission. And I was like, well, what's that? So, well, if you sell stuff, you get paid more. Like, oh, I want to do that. So that was my first sales job. I worked in like a literal call center with a bunch of cubicles, like 100 cubicles on this power dialer. And I just called people all day. It felt like 500 or 1,000 calls.
How many was it actually, like on a daily average?
I mean, I was literally on a power dialer for 8 hours. There was no emails, no sequences. It was just all calls. It was probably like over 500. Like, it was ridiculous.
Okay, then what?
Yeah, so after that, I realized that, I didn't want to work in a cubicle anymore. So I just started to find other jobs that would help me level up, right? At the time, I was going to school for marketing. So I was going to USF at the time. So I got a job in outside sales. selling paper flyers, like literally the junk mail that you get every week with like coupons on it. I
Right.
would sell those advertisements to like businesses. So I would drive around in my car all day and get told no, face to face. It was horrible. But I learned a lot. And then my mindset was always to what's the next thing? Like, what's the next thing that I could do to get better and advance in my career, right? So I'm like, hey, paper flyers is not going to be the thing. Well, like, what's next? So I started selling TV commercials. I thought that was like really cool. You know, I was in marketing. I was like, no, let me sell TV commercials. So I did that for a little while. And then I quickly realized that traditional media is not going to beat the internet, right? So then I remember going home one day and I literally typed into Google, what's the highest paying sales job that I could get? It's what I typed into Google. And the first thing that popped up was tech sales. So then I thought, okay, well, how do I get into tech sales? And I did what most people do, right? Like I went to Indeed and I went on Google and a bunch of other stuff. And none of that really worked. I lived in Tampa. It's not exactly like a tech hub, right? I wasn't living
Right.
in San Francisco. So then my only logical choice was like, let me go on LinkedIn. Let me try and like network with some people and maybe I can find some kind of in to some kind of company, right? So my mind was, let me just connect with every single person in Tampa that I can, like literally just sending random connections to people. And I did this for like months. I don't know if I would advise that strategy now, maybe, but that's what I did, right?
Yeah, that's
And
probably you'll end up in jail, LinkedIn jail, like if you do it today.
I mean, it was years ago, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I did. I just tried to make as many connections as possible. And one of those connections was an SDR manager in Tampa for this company called Outreach, right? And I remember seeing in her headline that SDR manager at Outreach, and in parentheses, it said, I'm hiring. Great. Let me just DM her, cold DM. And eventually I landed an interview and, you know, she admired like the hustle and the grit of me just like sending her a cold DM. And it took a chance on me.
That's so cool, and it goes to show that the strategy that like I keep talking about, and most of the people that I have on is really working well, and it's completely like timeless. Meaning, you did this like when was it? 2017, probably.
Yeah.
And it's like 2022, and so many SDR managers, sales leaders are advising like, hey, reach out, literally reach out any way you can, like, cold call somebody, send them an email, send them a cold DM, whatever. Just like do that additional hustle other than just clicking apply, and it has an amazing return. And so you did exactly that, and one thing led to another, so you landed an SDR job at Outreach, right?
Absolutely. And here's one other thing I'll add to that, right? If you want a job in sales development, the way that you get the job is by doing the job, right? If we kind of go back to what I was doing, I was adding a bunch of people on LinkedIn, again, don't recommend that randomly, but I was building a lead list, right? I was trying to find contacts and people that I wanted to go after. Same thing you would do if you had the job, right? And then once I built my prospecting list, I would reach out to them, right? So emails, calls, literally the same thing you would do once you land the job. So if a hiring manager sees that, they know that you've got the intangibles to succeed in the role. And that's ultimately why I got the job.
Exactly. There we go. Amazing. Okay. So was there anything specific when it comes to that interview process? If you can recall, I don't know, maybe some assessment steps, or like how long did it take? Did you have multiple steps, or did you like kind of get hired just with interacting with that SDR manager?
So here's another thing. Once you land an initial interview, you now, in theory, have to start thinking more of like an account executive, right? Because those initial meetings mean nothing, right? There's still an entire process that you have to go through. And Outreach went dark on me for like a week, and I had no idea what was going on. So I had to follow up with them, right? I had to treat it like I was closing a deal, right? An initial meeting means nothing. You've gotta see that through a a demo stage, show them what you know. You've got to give them some kind of proposal. You've got to close them at the end. You've got to follow up until there's like mutual interest, right? And that's what I did. I had to follow up 2 or 3 times during the actual interview process. There were some things that they were going through which delayed the process. It took me about a month, but I was on it. Like every couple of days, like, hey, checking in, where are we at? What's the next step? Are we moving forward? I'm interested. Are you interested? And ultimately, I got the job.
I don't think that there is literally a chance not to get the job after those after those activities, honestly, because it just shows the way you would perform in the job. And like that's I mean, it's not rocket science. That's all you have to do. Just be persistent, follow up, and make sure you come to a yes or a no as soon as possible, right?
100%. And the fact is that not everybody does that, though. That's the thing, right?
Exactly.
So, out of 100 applicants, I don't know, 50 might just hit apply, for example, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the other 50 are sending a message, right? So automatically 50 are out. I'm just giving like a wild example, but it's probably somewhat accurate, right? And then
Mhm.
out of the 50 that follow up, how many are going like the extra mile? Like who's following up 2 or 3 times, right? Maybe 20, right? So like you can kind of see how those numbers play out over time.
Exactly. And I would even go as far as to say that it's more like 90% of people just hit apply, 10% of people maybe send something, and then like 1% of people actually go the extra mile and like follow up a couple of times or send a voice note or a video or whatever. And not even that, like sometimes just it doesn't happen. But those that actually do that have a significantly higher chance of getting hired and getting that offering for them faster, right? And so even if you don't get a job with the one company, you do always have like a couple of other ones that you're kind of interviewing with. And so like one of those are going to be just like, this is amazing. I got to have this person on my team. So I love it, dude. Awesome. So your outreach career is like it's pretty long. You've been there for like 4.5 years. You've been almost 2 years as an SDR, and then an AE, and then an enterprise AE, right? Something
Yeah,
like
so
that.
I was an SDR for a year and 7 months, which is a whole nother story in and of itself. And I can just quickly cover that really quick. For people that are looking to get promoted into
Oh
an
yeah,
account executive role, um, one thing that I learned is that you might think you're ready for the next step, but the business might not be ready for the next step, right? There's, headcount, there is, maybe just your skill set, right? And those were some things that I ran into, right? At my year mark, I'm like, hey, I hit quota, like, let's do it. And I had to wait like another 6 months. So just calling that out that this might happen. You might be in that spot now if you're listening, but it's a real thing. And, that extra 6 months actually helped me a lot in my AE role because it gave me a chance to get a mentor and like actually
nice.
develop before I stepped into a full quota role.
Hey everyone, I started SDR Hire in the first place to help as many of you as I can to land your next job, become better at sales, and just help you propel your career. So if you're finding value in this content and you know somebody who would benefit from it, please share it with them, tag them in a post, send them via text, share it wherever you share stuff with your community. As always, all of this is completely free and is here to help everyone succeed. So your recommendation goes a long way. Appreciate you, and let's get back to the show.
By the way, were you kind of sour because you didn't get promoted after those 12 months? Like, did you feel bad, or like was it like, yeah, I'm gonna be mature about this and like just hold my horses until the opportunity shows itself?
Of course I felt bad.
There we go.
Of course I did. Of course I did. But again, that's where the mentorship helped, right?
Mm,
I think that I would advise that to anybody else that's listening. If you are looking to take that next step, find an AE that you're really cool with and ask them, hey, like, can I shadow some of your deals? Can you like show me some of the things that you wish you would have known when you started? Mindset is a big piece of it, right? Like, hey, I feel bad that I didn't get promoted, but like, what can I do to like make sure that I'm still in this position when the business is ready, right? And then, you know, after feeling bad for a week, I was back onto it, right? And again, like that 6 months helped me really get my mind right and understand what it takes to be successful in that role. And then once I got in there, like I was ready to go. And that's what really propelled me into like more of a president's club kind of position, right?
There we go. There we go. Before we dive deeper into that part of the story, I would just like for us to cover, just for the audience, like what is outreach? I teased it a little bit and not everybody would know what outreach is. So what is outreach? Who were you selling into? So the type of the audience, was it enterprise? Was it, mid-market, SMBs? Like what was that like? And yeah, like just that basic overview of the company.
Man, I haven't pitched outreach in like 9 months. In very simple terms, outreach is a sales execution platform. So just think of it as the central hub for any seller that needs to get their products and services out. So if you're an SDR, you're going to use outreach to put your ideal customers into sequences, right? Sequences are just series of touch points. So emails, calls, LinkedIn messages, and it's just going to organize your entire strategy, right? Integrates with Salesforce, get your contacts in, put them into workflows, make more money faster, automate some of the stuff you don't want to do.
Awesome. And were you, like when you started as an SDR, were you targeting bigger accounts, smaller ones? Did you progress? Was it like mixed? Did you have a specific geography? Like what was that like?
Yeah, so my outreach career is interesting, because I joined them almost 5 years ago. And, I started in an SMB sales development role. And 5 years ago, outreach wasn't obviously as prevalent as it is today. Like the number one objection I used to get is it different than Salesforce? That was what people used to ask me when I would cold call them. And fast forward 5 years, everybody knows what outreach is. Everybody knows what SalesLoft and Groove are and stuff like that. But early on, it was just trying to like educate people on like, what is this thing called sales development? What is this thing called sales engagement? Now they call it sales execution, right? That's kind of like evolved over time. But yeah, I started in SMB and eventually worked my way up to, corporate enterprise and sales development before moving on.
Nice. I think I used outreach in 2019, the first time. And it's already become a very like famous platform. It was like, okay, either outreach or SalesLoft, and that's more or less it. That's like 90% of the market. And then everything else is like a smaller fish. So it's interesting to have a perspective from a period when it wasn't really that like famous of a tool back in 2017. That's awesome. Cool. So right after so you got promoted to the AE role after a year and a half, a bit of feeling sour for not getting that role after 12 months, but it did give you an additional layer of perspective that has helped you propel into that President's Club space. And for everybody, like maybe you can explain what President's Club is for those that are not familiar with the sales jargon.
Yeah, President's Club. So I believe that at outreach, it might be different for other companies. Like if you were like at 120% of your annual quota, you would get invited to a trip with all of the other people that exceeded their sales targets for the year. They call that President's Club. It's usually somewhere tropical, like Mexico, where they give you a bunch of free food and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so basically flexing for being one of the best.
Yeah, in a nutshell, yes.
Awesome. And so fast forward, like you've been an AE there for the next couple of years, right? Maybe even more, 3 years.
Yeah, so basically, I moved into an emerging account executive role, and for outreach, that means more like SMB. And I did
Mhm.
that for a couple of years before moving into the corporate space, which is like the next tier of company in terms of company size.
Yeah, gotcha. So, can you remember any very interesting way that you booked a demo?
So here's the interesting thing, and I talk about this a lot on LinkedIn. I think that
Mm,
my time as an SDR helped me exponentially as an AE
mm,
because I never forgot where I came from, right? I always remembered what it felt like to be an SDR that worked with a really good AE and what it felt like to work as an SDR with like an AE that wasn't so good. And what I mean by good and bad isn't by in terms of like their skill set, but I mean like how they treated their teammates, right? And I talk about this quite a bit, but like SDRs don't work for you when you're an AE, right? You're supposed to work together. So I would always partner with my SDRs, and we worked with maybe 6 or 7 of them at outreach. So like these 6 or 7 SDRs controlled all of my accounts, and therefore they controlled all of my meeting flow, right? So if I was just rude and I was talking badly about the meetings that they gave me, then like why would they want to work for me? Why would they want to partner with me to get
yeah.
me meetings? So my strategy was always like, how do I serve them?
Mm,
How am I gonna make their life a lot easier so they in turn feel like, hey, I would really want to work with Roberto, right? So I
yeah.
would just say like the most interesting ways that I got meetings is I would just be like the most friendly AE like on planet Earth, and then everybody would want to send me meetings. So my meeting flow is always the highest because I was the most liked on the team. Well, maybe other people disagree, but that's what I.
Fair enough. It's a very interesting perspective. Nobody has like portrayed it in that way. They usually explain a very creative way that they booked a meeting, but I think this topic is even more important than booking a single demo because like I've had like bad relationships with my AEs and I've had great relationships, and I tried when I was an AE for a short period to have a good relationship with my SDRs. And I feel that you know it also improves um, the way that prospects see the brand and the company that they're buying from if there is alignment between the SDR and the AE. For example, if the handoff is poor, then the AE is probably going to ask more or less the same questions as the SDR. Then that creates friction with the prospect who's like, dude, like you're wasting my time. We already had this conversation and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think it's a huge topic that like a lot of organizations don't really pay a lot of attention to. And it's probably the place where the most friction is created in the sales development process. What do you think?
Right. And to your point, the silver bullets and tactics to get one meeting are only going to get you so far, right? Like, hey, I sent this really great email that landed me this one meeting. Well, like, is that going to be a repeatable process that's going to get you to
Uh-huh.
your number every month or every year? Probably not. Is building a great relationship with your SDR and AE going to get you to quota faster and more consistently? Probably,
Mm,
right? And that's really where my mindset goes, right? Like, how can I make this relationship with my SDR great to where we're constantly communicating, and then I show up to that first initial demo and the SDR's on it, right? And the SDR is introducing me on like a live handoff. Now the customer feels great. We all feel good. And now the call goes well. It turns into a sale. The SDR's happy. They go get me another one. Right?
there we
That's
go.
like the that's like the flywheel that I always strived to create. So it's less about what's this like magical silver bullet email, and it's more about how do I create a better process
Mhm.
together with my team.
I love that. That's really insightful. And so like um you basically what are you saying? What you're saying is you owe like the success of your career to your SDRs, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, listen, without your SDRs, your pipeline is slim to none, right? Like as
Mm,
an AE, you're always gonna prospect on your own, right? Like that never goes away, right? But SDRs are like the lifeblood of your pipeline, right? You got a prospect on your own as an AE, but you also need your team, right? If
Got
that's
it.
the model that you're working under, right? So to get the most out of that, it requires effort, and you've got to be intentional about building that relationship. And that's what separates like a good to decent AE to like a president's club level AE, right?
Yeah. No, that's so important, such an important perspective of like, people always think it's about the individual. It's about, how hard you can grind, how hard you can hustle. But I think you bring up the most important point, which is having a process that can lead to great results, regardless of the individuals. Obviously, you played a role in creating those relationships. But what I'm saying is, if you were to take on a team right now, you could do the same thing. You could even teach somebody, hey, this is how you build a great relationship with, like, in between your SDRs and AEs. Like, it's a scalable thing, and that is what creates value, at least from my perspective. So I love that. I would love to keep chatting about this, but I want to transition into your next role, which is totally different than what you've been working on for the past like 4.5 years, which is a sales agency. So I don't want to butcher what the company does. You can tell us better. So Sapper Consulting, is that the name?
I moved down to Sapper Consulting after Outreach. Yeah. So, through my time at Outreach, almost 5 years, I came to the understanding that, platforms like Outreach and SalesLoft and Groove, they're really powerful, right? And you can do a lot with them, but they require a lot of intentionality to get the most out of them, right? Nobody on planet Earth buys Salesforce and like hooks it up themselves and it works automatically. That doesn't happen, right? But
Yeah.
Products like Outreach are so new that that's what people were doing with them. And as a byproduct, a lot of SDRs and AEs would get set up on it. They would get trained on it one time, and then they're tasked to go build all this pipeline with it. That's incredibly hard to do, right?
That's right.
So I joined Sapper to help companies get the most out of Outreach. Sapper handled a lot of like implementations for Outreach. They did some trainings. They built these sales playbooks for companies. And that's really when I started to wrap my head around, well, like, what do I want to do long term? And, as a former SDR, as a former AE, I really started to get around the idea of like, I can help people get the most out of this from like a end user standpoint. That's really like where my skill set lies, right? So I built Carrero Consulting to do just that, right? There are very specific click paths inside of Outreach that can help you do something in 30 seconds versus 10 minutes. And a lot of people don't understand those things because it takes years to master something like a tool like Outreach, right? So that's what I do. I help people understand like the literal workflow and click path inside of the platform so they could save a bunch of time every day and do their job at a higher level.
Hey there. I wanted to let you in on a couple of additional resources available other than the podcast and the social media content. So I recently started a newsletter where I break down the best pieces of advice from the podcast about getting hired, how to be a top performing sales rep, into actionable nuggets that you can apply literally as soon as you read them. And in addition, if you're currently looking for an SDR role, you can fill out a form to let me know, and I'll do my best to help put you in front of tech companies hiring for SDRs. All right, back to the show.
Okay, that's super cool. I was just I wanted to pay a lot of attention to your consulting practice that you just started. One quick question though that I'm personally interested in: how different was it selling SaaS product versus an agency service? because Sapper is like a sales agency, right? Something like that. So I bet it was totally different, or was it? Like, what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, services versus software is entirely different, right? When you're selling software, you can pull up a demo and say like, hey, here's all these cool things that we could do, and here's all these cool features, right? I mean, clearly you don't want to sell on features, but there is something for someone to connect to when they are in a conversation with you, right? There's like a physical product that they will obtain once they pay you money, right? When you are selling services, you are selling an outcome, right? You are working with me and we will get to X point, right? If you work with Carrero Consulting, I'll save you 5 hours per week in your outreach workflow, right? But there is a level of credibility that you must have for someone to trust you and connect with you, right? So that's really the difference. I'm selling you a journey that does not include like a physical thing if it's consulting, right? It can if it's like a course or something like that. But in terms of like one-on-one consulting, you've got to trust me, right? You've got to trust me that I know what I'm doing with outreach before you sign up. So that's kind of the main difference.
Oh yeah, gotcha. Cool. So you have just become an official entrepreneur. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So okay. So I'm just reading through the questions. I'm curious. What about your currently like your go-to-market strategy, and how big do you see it? Like, do you even have like a vision? Because I didn't have a vision. I just had, or rather, I didn't have like a structure when I started this, where like, okay, I want this, like I know where I'm going. I had like a vague idea of the direction of where I'm going. So like, what is it for you? Like, are you currently in the stage of, hey, I know how I can help, I'm just kind of, touching a few different GTM strategies, or you already know like, okay, this is my product, this is exactly what I'm offering, and these are my go-to-market strategies?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I'm planning on building this out over time, right? This is something that I've currently launched, but I am starting a full-time SDR manager role in January. So, like a lot of these types of businesses, it takes time to ramp them up. And that's something that I'm aware of, right? So SDR is something I'm very passionate about. I'm going to be leading a team for the first time, which is going to be great. Sure, there's going to be a lot of learnings of how I can like add that into the consulting business. Like, how do you coach a team using outreach, right? Here's my long-term vision, right? There are a lot of companies out there that do outreach consulting, call it, right? And they're very good at what they do. What I have found is that there are not a lot of people that have real experience in the seat doing what I do, meaning like, were they an SDR at outreach specifically? Like, were they an AE at outreach specifically, right? I'm not the best at technical integrations and things like that. There's a lot of people I could partner with to do that, right? So my long-term vision is to build a company that is full of people that have been in like the outreach trenches, right? SDRs, AEs, people that can actually show you like the good click paths inside of outreach to master your workflow, right? So long-term, I envision training full teams, right? Full teams of SDRs and AEs on how to master their outreach workflow, coming from people that have done it. That's like the ultimate vision. And if there's integration and technical help, then I've got people that can do that, right?
Gotcha. No, that's really cool. And I feel like I was just like, oh yeah, there we go. Like, I'm talking to a fellow entrepreneur. He's like going all in and stuff like that. And then now you tell me you're getting a new role. No, but that's cool. Can you share the details, or is it going to be a surprise in January?
We'll leave it as a surprise, but it's coming very soon. But I am excited to lead a team of SDRs and make them a bunch of outreach ninjas. I think that's gonna be amazing.
Oh, yeah.
But the cool thing about that is that they run on a 4-day work week, which is nice. So I will have a lot of time to dive into this consulting side of the business. So
Yep.
excited.
I think that you will actually get a lot of reps at figuring out those training sessions and stuff like that, because like basically your job is going to be, hey, I'm here to make sure you guys are hitting quota and are being, outreach ninjas, which is literally going to be ideal for creating the best training sessions, the best curriculums, and processes for training your clients, right?
100%. That's really the idea, right? And that
Yeah.
was the inspiration for me making a move like that. It ties into my mission, ties into my vision. So I'm excited to help SDRs and AEs save a bunch of time and make a bunch more money.
Nice. I love it. I love it, dude. Thanks for sharing those things. So, let me just see. So what would be your message to everyone trying to become an SDR, break into tech? Like, what would be like an overarching message?
Yeah, if we rewind it to the beginning of the call, I would say there's a certain level of grit and tenacity you've got to have to get a role like this. And like if you would listen to the first end of the call, like you've gotta do the job before you get the job, right? So, build your ideal target list, prospect into them, email them, call them. Once you land an interview, put that into your pipeline, follow up, make sure that you're running like a tight sales cycle. Always ask for next steps, close them, tell them you want the position, do the intangibles, things that other people will not do. Send a video, send them a gift in the mail, something to stand out from anyone else that is just hitting apply and doing nothing else.
Nice. So if you were in an interview right now, in an interview process, like what would be the questions that you would ask them? So what would you ask the hiring managers if you were an SDR?
That's a really, really good question. I think it depends on the pre-meeting research, right? Again, like you've got to treat this like an actual sales cycle. So, what would you do before an initial meeting with a company? You would go on their LinkedIn, right? What information do they have on there? You would go on their company website. You would look at recent news. If it's a public company, look at like a 10K. What are things that they're focused on? Have you talked to anybody else in the company to get some kind of insights into things that they're focused on? And I would follow that line of questioning. So I wouldn't, for me personally, I don't think I had like this bucket of questions that I would ask. I would mainly do pre-meeting research to then find questions that are relevant for that specific conversation. Depends on who you're talking to, right? Is it a frontline manager? Is it a VP? Is it, a coworker potentially? So that there's so many variables that come into play. I would say do the pre-meeting research and then build a custom set of questions for each person.
Nice. I love that. That's really important, especially because like folks often even don't do that initial research where like they get confused who they're talking with, or like in my mind, I need to know what's the size of, like literally as if I was going into a sales call with a potential client. So the size of the company, the market, the industry, the type of the product, so everything like that. And what I like, a lot of other people that I've asked this question to, they mention things like, in regards to the safety of the role itself, like, getting into a company like Outreach, like it's probably a very safe bet in a sense of speaking. But for example, a lot of companies are like on shaky legs and like whether they'll succeed or not. And so the questions for those companies might be something in the lines of, how much, like how many of the SDRs on the team are hitting quota, or like, I don't know, whatever, like things of that nature. Like, do you have any one of those?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question to ask, right? How many people do you have on the team? How many are hitting their number, right? What are your growth targets for the year? Are you going to hit those growth targets, right? What do you see somebody like me in this role? Like, what do you want us to bring to that team, right?
Nice.
Again, there's a bunch of custom questions that you can ask. but that's more so how I think about it. If a company's on shaky legs, like what are you doing to get out of that situation? Is that why you're bringing me on? Right? What are like some of the values that you see someone in this role bringing to the team? Things
Nice.
along those lines.
Nice. I love that one, especially the shaky legs example, because it really comes down to the company that you're interviewing with. And so your questions need to be aligned with the situation. I like that because it's literally like a sales cycle and the prospect that you're talking to. Cool. Okay, so where can people find you? Obviously, LinkedIn.
Yeah, I would say the biggest one is LinkedIn. So, I could send you a link. I don't know if you could drop it into the page or something like that, but Roberto Carrero on LinkedIn. In my featured section, you'll find a link to my website. There's just more information on Carrero Consulting. That's the number one place. My DMs are open. If you've got questions, go ahead and reach out to me, and happy to answer any questions you might have. And yeah, excited to connect with you all. Feel free to send me a connection request and we'll go from there.
Nice. Awesome. By the way, have you considered going on TikTok?
I thought about it. A lot of people ask me about going on TikTok. I think for this breaking into tech line, I think that it would be helpful. So I am considering it. Do you think I should?
100%, like 1,000%. And here's why. Here's how I'm thinking about it. I think you could create a ton of very useful content about how to use outreach, because you mentioned like you have shortcuts that somebody can do in like 10 to 30 seconds compared to like 10 minutes, right? So, or like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, doesn't matter. And I mean, that's how long a TikTok is. And so you can literally say something like, hey, instead of doing this for like 10 minutes, here's a better way. And something like that. I don't know, like it doesn't really matter. And it does take a bit of time to kind of master that, all of that, like virality and TikTok slang, whatever. But I think it's a great channel because it has that organic virality that just unlocks so many opportunities. Unlike LinkedIn, where you gotta really like fight for each follow, for each like, for each engagement point. So that's kind of why I'm mentioning it.
Cool, man. I am inspired now leaving this conversation to start a TikTok.
There we go. No, I've noticed that there is an insane amount of people either trying to break into tech or people just in the tech space following those accounts. So there's definitely like there isn't a lack of followers to acquire over there. So I think it's a good channel. Anyway. Cool. So let's jump into the rapid fire questions part, and then we can wrap it up. Cool.
Rapid fire questions. All right.
All right. Okay. So what would you name as the best SDR learning resource?
The best SDR learning resource. I don't know. I would say there are a lot of individual people that I would follow on LinkedIn specifically for SDR resources. One of my favorites is actually Josh Braun. And I know like everybody on LinkedIn follows him already, and he is who he is. But the one reason why I think he would help a lot of up and coming SDRs is because he teaches you how to weave in story and storytelling into everything that you do. And I think that's really important, right? Whether you're posting on LinkedIn or sending an email or talking to somebody, people connect with stories a lot more. And if you can learn how to use that in your selling career, I think you'll go a lot farther. So,
gotcha.
Josh Braun.
Love that. Josh Braun, one of my favorite ones as well. Cool. So best SDR skill.
Listening for sure. I mean, we all love to talk. I love to talk, right? But whether you are on a cold call or running a demo, you've obviously got to ask the right questions, but you got to be able to listen and pivot. I think that's the main thing, and that's what makes a successful SDR. If you can quickly absorb some information and take the prospect into a different direction, that'll go a long way.
Gotcha. What is your favorite outbound channel?
Favorite outbound channel? I'd say picking up the phone. I think that over the years, I see so much content on LinkedIn about, the perfect email and all that kind of stuff. And I think that as SDRs, a lot of them could use email as a safety net, right? I'm scared to make a call, so I'm just going to send a bunch of automated emails, or maybe personalize one email for half an hour and hope that it lands, right? But I booked most of my meetings on the phone. I would use email as a channel for them to understand who I am or see my name, right? So by the time that I call them, they might remember me as the guy that sent them the email, right?
Gotcha.
But most of my meetings were booked on the phone.
Speaking of which, what would you say is your favorite cold call opener?
Favorite cold call opener?
Or like a go-to one
Honestly,
that you... Yeah.
honestly, I would just keep it very, very simple. I used to call people and I would just ask them like, hey, is this X person? And then they would say yes. And then I would just go straight into it. I would say, hey, I sent you an email about X. I would always use my emails as a loose call script. I would have a general script that I'd use, but I honestly learned to get away from saying the same thing every time. Made my job really boring. I'm just going to say the same cold call opener every single time. Just take some skill, but let's say that I personalized the first line or two of an email that I sent them. I would have that pulled up. So, hey, is this X? They say, yes, it's X. Like, hey, I just sent you an email about this thing that I just sent you an email about. Like, hey, do you have like a quick minute to talk about that? Right? So each opener was actually like a little bit personalized based on the work that I had already done in the past. So that's the strategy.
I like it. It makes literally every single one of your cold calls a little bit unique compared to the other one, and not dull and boring, both to the prospect as well as to yourself. I love it.
That's it.
Cool. Okay, so what is your go-to call to action?
So it's evolved over time. I think that in the past, there would always be like a hard, let's get into the meeting. Like, hey, do you have 15 minutes or 30 minutes next Tuesday or Wednesday to have a conversation? I think I've learned that a lot of people hate that, right? So where I'm leaning more towards now is just asking for interest. Like, hey, is this something that you think is valuable to you? Can this help your business? Are you interested in learning more? Right? Then if you get a yes, then you can ask for the meeting. So I think it's more so piquing their interest versus like, hey, 30 minutes, just like everybody else.
Gotcha. Love it. I feel the same. Awesome. Hey, this was great. Roberto, you are amazing. I wish you all the best in your entrepreneurial endeavor as well as in your new role. And I love the way you do sales. We should do this again sometime. I'm going to keep following you and make sure I'm in the loop of what's going on. If I come across somebody in need of outreach help, I know a guy. So I appreciate you coming on.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the time. It was great talking with you.
Sweet. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the SDR Hire podcast, the only podcast exclusively focused on SDRs, where successful salespeople share about their hiring stories and sales adventures straight from the trenches. If you found this useful, go ahead and share it with someone else you know is trying to break into tech or land their next SDR gig. You can find SDR Hire on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and catch you in the next episode.